everyone, and welcome to Commerce Shift, the show for learning how to adapt for success as a scaling multi-channel brand. My name is Nick Rauschenbusch, co-founder here at Shogun, and throughout the season one of this mini-series, we're discussing how you can intentionally build exceptional shopping experiences. In Commerce Shift, we bring you exclusive advice from the brands who have been successful, plus help you better navigate the choppy e-commerce waters with expert hot takes on what's next. Today, I'm very excited to chat with Alex O'Byrne, co-founder of We Make Websites. Alex, you and I have known each other for years, man, going way back. What's the latest with We Make Websites? What you got going on these days?
So what's the latest with us? We're launching a lot of things. We'll put a Born group now, so a lot of people might have seen that in the press or social media or whatever. So we're part of a much bigger entity. Still doing Shopify only, still based in the same places. So UK, US, Canada, generally. I think what we're seeing a lot of is bigger brands than ever coming onto Shopify, and I guess that's been the trend for the past few years. But I'm starting to see, either Fortune 500 companies or companies that I remember growing up, like coming, onto Shopify now, which is kind of crazy. So all good.
Yeah, it's wild to see the movement of some of these larger, like mid-market enterprise-esque brands, either coming from other platforms or they're just growing up. And they were fast rising D2Cs not too long ago. And congrats on the team up with Born. That's super exciting news.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Help us get to the next level.
Absolutely. Right on. So at Shogun, we've been talking about how e-commerce is totally different now from how it was 10 years ago. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges now in e-commerce compared to, 10 or 5 years ago?
Okay, so I think on the business side, there is the continual influence of Amazon, and the fact that they do it faster and cheaper most of the time. I think there's the ongoing war between Apple and Facebook on ads, which I think has affected a lot of high growth D2C.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the web only, websites are getting more complicated to build, not easier. Well, or at least there's more to think about. So, accessibility, speed, building a great experience, making the site easy to update. They're all stuff that it's getting more difficult to do well.
Yeah, the expectations, requirements are have increased steadily. And agreed. Yeah, I think that obviously Amazon has become just a behemoth, over the past 10 years. How do you think Amazon and marketplaces generally have changed how shoppers discern like quality of brand or quality of products?
I would have thought most people listening to this are selling like high margin, high quality products. So hopefully not having to compete too directly with Amazon. But I think Amazon's ability to make things clear and, like I say, cheap and fast, it is hard to do. And I think that's affected what consumers expect. If you're a smaller brand, it's harder to do those things. But at the same time, shopping in Amazon is like shopping in a warehouse. It's not exactly inspiring.
Yeah, I really like that analogy, actually. What do you think consumers value most now when it comes to shopping online? How do you think their focus has changed?
So again, I think it's like a frictionless experience. So something that is easy and quick to shop on, isn't annoying, but is also inspiring and informative. So balancing the two of having a more rich experience on the site, but keeping some of the things that people come to expect, like super fast page load times, ease of payment, saving details for later, helping people find products in the first place. The expectations are that everything is getting easier.
Yeah.
And that's what's making things harder, I guess. That's what
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I want uniqueness and novelty, but with the same ease of use,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
don't want it to be stamped out of the same mold like with Amazon. I want it to be unique and differentiated, yet at the same time still incredibly intuitive and simple to use.
exactly.
And I want it to be highly performant. It's just so it's just like expectations across the board in a lot of ways. Um, Changing tack a little bit and getting into an interesting topic. So, in the 70s, the idea of atmospherics was introduced, the discipline that studies the place of a product as the most significant feature, or it's the idea of atmosphere being even more critical than the product itself. And I think that, we probably see this when we go into some of these, amazing physical storefronts like Apple or Marine Layer, or whatever your favorite brand is. Um, and typically, this has been spoken about or applied to physical retail. With omni-channel devices and digital signage and H&M, for example, the overall idea is that there are sensory qualities of space and in a physical place that impact consumers' perception and purchases, things like color and light and smell and sound and even temperature. How do you see this idea of atmospherics shifting to owned web experiences? How do you craft atmosphere virtually, digitally, online?
Um, that's a good question. So I'd not heard of this concept before, but it does make sense. And I remember when I was growing up, if you went to the mall, it was kind of a drab experience. And again, you were basically shopping in a warehouse, is kind of how it felt. And then when I was building my business in the early days, I didn't used to do things like go shopping for quite a long time. And I ended up going to a Westfield mall, a new one near where I lived in London at the time. I kind of been amazed at like how theatrical the whole experience was. Like you said, there's music everywhere. Every store you go in has got this unique experience. It's like highly produced experience where the product is still forefront, but it's in this atmosphere. Yeah, exactly. That obviously conveys the brand and gives you a sense of what it's about. So it does make sense that the same thing is happening online.
Yeah.
And I think the way to do it online, it starts with content, so high quality video content, photography, clear messaging. I actually think animation, subtle animation, plays a big part here. That if you go on a site today that feels state of the art and modern, it tends to have these micro animations and little subtle things that just make you feel. It just feels good to use a site. So I think the same thing's happening, that people want a rich experience, and it's a form of differentiation that will point you as being different to a mass retailer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I I think that I've being in tech, I appreciate those UI animations and interactions that are on these websites, and pick up on them, maybe more so than others because I look for them. But yeah, it really does create a much different feel than when you get something that is just like an out of the box theme or something, even from a standard page builder. And hey, we make page builder software, right? But going beyond stuff like parallax and really going into some of these more rich interactions, it does make a big difference in quality. How does this manifest, or how has this manifested in some of the projects that We Make Websites has done for clients?
So I guess the way we are able to achieve that is through process. So we always use design workshops to try and figure out the balance between brand and conversion. I guess that's another thing here that we haven't talked about, which is although Amazon is kind of ugly, like it definitely works. I mean, how much of that is the fact that people know how it works is one thing, but it's definitely got that some of the tricks of sort of scarcity and clear conversion paths and so on. So we always start by trying to balance with the brand, like, how transactional should it be and how elegant, let's say.
Yeah.
And that leads into, well, that is part of design strategy. So that's, are we doing the right thing? And so that's research and defining what the brand is trying to achieve. And then once that's done, you start design execution. So that's doing those things right. So generating new concepts, evaluating them, testing them out, and delivering on them. And our design team summarized that by saying, or asking, how does the site make you feel when you're on it? So that's quite a big part of our kind of process. So during the build, we use agile methodology. So every 2 weeks we're getting new releases. So during the build, it's crucial to kind of get that feedback and actually use the site and see, what does it feel like?
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that balance kind of between, is the site being functional and the site being optimized for conversion and it being more experiential. I find that I ask that a lot to clients when they're talking about some of this. It's because there is a bit of a push and a pull on that, right?
Yeah, and it's changed a bit now, but going back a few years, all the luxury brands still had these really hard to use sites, and it was almost intentional. Maybe it was intentional, but it's it wasn't like you had that clear selling points or clear conversion paths. But I think that's why Net-a-Porter and brands like that, companies like that cleared up, because there was an opportunity to sell luxury, but do it in a way that was cross-device, fast, easy, and so on. So I think that trend of like not having to care too much about the online experience or the conversion of the online experiences is a thing of the past, I think, now. And everyone cares about having a digital experience that is omni-channel, omni-device, omni-device, and fast, easy, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. What in your opinion does a winning atmosphere look like for top brands? Like, what are the feelings that successful brands are evoking?
So I think an immersive about page is a good place to start, and I think everyone's seen those, the sort of either founder's journey or the brand story with lots of amazing imagery and a bit of an inspirational tale of why that brand was created. But I think beyond that, identifying the different journey types, so that might be like people coming from different regions and so on, but it might also be user segments. So like, for example, new users often want some sense of context, to know why you're different, to know what the best sellers are, and why they should trust your brand. Whereas return users are going to be asking different things. So they want a bit of familiarity. They want to know what's new. They might want to know what they bought before. They might want to be able to or want to engage with the brand more. And I think the important thing is, whether it's a new user or a return user, the whole brand experience is weaved all the way through. So every touch point. So the first page you land on, right through to checkout, right through to emails that come, follow-up emails, so like order confirmation and review requests and so on. And even the unboxing experience. And that's one of the things that I think has also changed a lot in the last 10 years, actually. Nick, going back to your first question, which is, for all these fancy D2C brands, we're used to getting these amazing experiences that I guess were inspired by Apple originally. That it's still a cardboard box at the end of the day, but it just has that feel that helps you have a consistent experience with the brand. So I think weaving that all the way through is the secret.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, it's funny how I know what the packaging from my favorite D2Cs look like, especially the ones that I get on recurring basis, like consumer packaged goods. Like I love Schoolyard Snacks, cereal school, and like their packaging, their boxes are just like, you know the brand immediately when you see them. Do you find, talking a little bit about narrative and shoppers really wanting to interact with the brand on a deeper level, do you find that more and more brands are weaving their ethos into their story and what they're all about? I would just be curious, like how often does that come up when you're scoping out these projects? Like, hey, in terms of an ethos, values perspective, this is what we want to convey.
I would say it's nearly 100% of the time. So like I say, there's normally a cheaper version of what it is that you can buy somewhere else, like, Amazon or Target or whatever. And whether that's whiskey or snowboarding gear or loungewear or whatever, the difference between paying $200 for a hoodie versus one from Target, right? Like, there's a reason that people are doing that. So I think all brands that wouldn't, all brands really. So anyone that's not selling through Amazon and just competing based on price or basically price, have to have some kind of reason why they are superior, and that is often the origin story leading into a point of differentiation of quality. Like, we care, like in the example of whiskey, right? We have a heritage that means that we have created this whiskey over 150 years. Yeah. Or like some of our other clients, so like Pangaea for us are a really good example of a brand. They do loungewear, but the science and sustainability behind their products is just so superior that they're just cleaning up at the minute, and that's creating a bit of a buzz. So celebrities are wearing them, so you're getting that sort of snowball effect. And they're the tailwinds of a pandemic when everyone was at home in their pajamas, so having a nice pair of pajamas made a big difference. But I think them telling the story of their fabrics and the fact that they are trying to innovate for sustainability really captures people's imaginations. And most people now, I think, care about sustainability to some degree and want to make sure they're doing that. So when you find a brand like this that's high quality and, cool basically, but also super sustainable, that's way more engaging than going and buying, some pajamas in Target or whatever. So it's a nice example of like how a brand can take something that you might perceive as a commodity, but actually it's something that they've been able to make into a luxury.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave a couple of great examples there, but that would kind of be my next question is like, what are some brands that off the top of your head are just absolutely nailing experience and atmosphere?
Pangaea is a good one. I was on a store the other day, which was Dope Snow in the UK, and they're cool. So like they immediately on the store, like you get the whole feel. It's snowboarding and skiing gear, so immediately you get the feeling of like, well, they're quite lucky because it's the sort of content that's interesting, right? Someone doing a lot of tricks on a snowboard or whatever as soon as you open the store. But of course, that is what they sell. They sell the clothing to go with it. So you dive into clothing, but they have this really nice outfit builder, so you can like assemble like the top and the beanie and the goggles and everything, and you can actually see the guy, like you can just swap it out super easily, and it is way more captivating than just adding a few things to a cart and checking out and having no idea how they're going to work together and so on. Which if you think now 99% of Shopify and e-commerce stores generally still have that flow, right, of like homepage, product, add to cart, checkout.
Yep.
Which is fine in a lot of cases, but it was a nice example of not having that path exactly and having more of like a showroom, like a changing room, effectively, to like try a lot of stuff on the mannequin and then check that out. So I thought that was a good example of a store using atmospherics, I suppose. Because the other thing was I spent a lot longer on the site because you could play around with it a bit more. So you sort of create this attachment to the site versus some generic store that just has an enormous inventory, and again feels more like a warehouse, which sometimes that's what you want. You just want it fast and cheap, but a lot of times when you're buying things like snowboarding gear, you want to buy something that's a bit more high quality.
Absolutely. And the experience of like building or compiling or configuring that like perfect outfit, or that the perfect outfit gear combination, and it's it kind of reminds me, I think one of the experiences that captured me most initially was like that, the Apple Watch experience, just being able to configure the Apple Watch in that very tactile way on a device. And then, of course, I noticed, and I don't know, my guess is that Apple did it first, but now, Rolex, we were talking about the luxury segment, right? And if you were going to a Rolex boutique, they put so much into atmosphere in their boutiques, and I feel like they leverage a very similar type of configuration for their various watches.
Mm.
that Apple's used, but in the Rolex atmosphere and style. That's pretty wild. That's one that I really like. Um, what are some of the design elements that top brands are asking we make websites to create for them? The design elements that are kind of going to the next level or the next generation of what visual merchandising is and can be.
Right. Okay. I think this follows on from your point that you just made, which is the store has to rise to the level of what these luxury brands, it's not just luxury, I suppose, but sort of differentiated D2C brands are doing. So like going into the store and feeling that experience um, often is part of the price you're paying for that experience in the store. So I think it's taken a long time, but sites have kind of caught up with that and been able to show off in their own way. And so in terms of sections and things, I think we get a lot of brands that want to have in-depth content on the product pages. So like a bit more about the product, but for example, you're scrolling down and you're seeing the product in different ways and all the sides of it and all the specs of it, and then in the wild and everything you might want to know about that product, but in a really compelling way. Some brands carefully use like inspiring editorial content as well, like immersed through the site. So you're immediately getting that education of who the brand is. So I think it's having these components on the site or sections on the site that are, you're able to add interesting video or messaging or imagery in, and that to be something that's easy to do and something that is you're not having to edit the template, every time you do it, that you're able to just plonk that stuff in previously sort of templated pages. So like product, normally, we all know the product page. It's image on the left, title on the right, price, add to cart, and then if you're lucky, maybe a section underneath. But I think building that into something that's a bit more of an experience, more in depth, is really important, and great for SEO too, to have a lot more content on those pages.
Yeah, and is this something that has like previously kind of been not a best practice or off limits for various reasons?
I think, yeah, doing it in a way that is not a headache to manage, I think, is the hard thing. So both in terms of development, but also for the site editor. So making something that they can reuse components across the site and break away, I guess, from the idea of like a blog, a blog post being like a title and a body, or a product page being, like I say, the image and the title and stuff. And instead saying, well, okay, it might be a product page, but I actually want to add in a lot of content from elsewhere on the site, or whatever, is something that is relatively new, I think, in terms of being able to do it easily.
Yeah, like again, breaking out of the mold and the rigidity that's like this, a blog page has to look like a blog page looked 5 years ago, right? Everyone has a conception of what a blog page is or what a product page is, and realizing that all that stuff's a little more malleable.
Yeah.
Do you find that like the tech has been restrictive at all? Like just in terms of being able to create the kinds of content that you want to take within something like a theme paradigm, or are there performance concerns when you're building these types of more experiential or sites that have heavier amounts of content?
Yeah. So I think we only build on Shopify. So I think that the delay in having online store 2.0 meant we had to solve that at least one way already. So I think Shogun Page Builder is a good example of that. And we've done custom builds of themes before that have got really advanced ways in which the store is edited, but they were big themes, like big projects. And I think now online store 2.0 has helped with that a lot. And then these headless technologies, I don't know if you call yourself headless technology, but the new paradigm of modern technologies for building websites have helped a lot, because they've come at it from an assumption that, of course, people want to do that, right? Of course, people want to be able to make a blog post that's a bit more untemplated, or product pages, or reuse content across the site dynamically, and so on. So I do think the technology is getting better, and in some ways, yeah, I think it's easier than it used to be, for sure.
Yeah. Talk to me more about that, like, and how, like, the new kind of emergent technologies are supporting, well, I should say, actually making it so that you don't have to have that trade-off between novel design that's more
Yeah.
rich and interactive and performance, site speed.
Yeah, I think a good way of thinking about it, both in terms of site speed and in terms of what you can build in the first place, is that modern technologies. So, like on Shogun front end, you're building these React components that are super fast and quick to build because it's React.
Yep.
And that means, first of all, we can go to our designers and say, hey, there's no need to think about the template of the theme here, like the underlying one. You can just do whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
and we'll figure out how to do it. So that's quite a big thing. But then site speed is interesting because you're not having to work around the theme so much. So we haven't used like a store theme for a long time. We always have our own internal theme, but even then, like you end up often using a lot of code to do something that might not really require that much code. And I do think that anything that's you're able to build, for example, with React on like Shogun, is going to make that experience not only faster development wise, but rendering faster too.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I'm explaining it to folks, it's not necessarily intuitive to folks that aren't technical, but it's like, the more code that you have for the page, the slower the page is going to take to load. And if you want to create, theoretically, you could create a really robust experience and you could write it out all in HTML, but it'd take an enormous amount of code. Right. Yeah. Whereas like with JavaScript, you could write, you could achieve the same or better result with way less code and avoiding that load time. And especially if you're leveraging some of these technologies, whether it's Shogun frontend or any of these technologies that enable companies to leverage server-side rendering, then at that point, you're really switching to a completely different type of paradigm, where from dynamic page generation, where it's like every time a page loads, it's got to go grab all the content and run all these third-party requests and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and on that topic, so the Shopify apps that install themselves are the main problem for speed for us. So we do as much as we can, but eventually, if an app is putting its tag in the wrong way, or just adding an enormous library in where we don't need it to do that, it slows the site down. So I think when we're using a front-end technology like Shogun, we're able to custom do it ourselves, like figure out exactly how we're going to integrate into whatever third party, let's say it's Yotpo or Nosto or one of these search and filtering options or whatever it is. There's normally quite a big list, to be honest, when we do a project.
Yeah.
So being able to interact directly with those and pull in what we need and have I want to say custom implementation, but it's not quite custom because I know these platforms help out a lot, but have an integration that allows us to control pulling in from the apps and not just have a one-click install is good. And I think when one-click installs came along, so 10 years ago or so in like Shopify App Store, it was great because it meant you suddenly had this way of easily adding an app without having technical knowledge. But I think now most brands can see that that's good in the early days, but you actually want to be able to have a custom implementation of the services you're using, not only for speed, but to get exactly what you want out of it, to get data to flow around your architecture in the way you want it to. And that requires custom development. And some like Shogun front end is speeding that process up.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, thank you for the shout out there. It is, we realize this with Page Builder, just the issue with apps, period, right? Because especially Shopify is an incredible platform, but you're totally right. It's, you have these merchants that will go and they'll go on like an app spree, and they're not even necessarily keeping all the apps. Sometimes they're just trying them out, right? Every time they install one of those apps, it's in many cases, injecting code into their theme file, again, making theme files bigger adversely impacting performance. To that end, even if they're uninstalled, they don't have that ability to clean up the code after themselves. And agencies like me, we make websites, if you're not starting from scratch, you're probably having to dig through that stuff and rip it out of there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, especially if all those third-party apps are triggering API calls on page load, then it cuts in two ways. It's like it's increasing the size of the theme files and it's triggering those API calls. I do think that this is where headless, mock, composable, there's many different ways to consider this architecture are coming in to solve some of that stuff. Are you finding that merchants are still feeling the same urgency around addressing the speed pain points as they were last year or the year before? Is it becoming more of an issue, less of an issue?
I think it's definitely more understood now that that's a thing to keep an eye on. It felt like it used to be almost like a developer's job to keep an eye on speed, but I think most people now, most marketers know that that's quite a key thing. So I think that's what happened when there was the big shift to Google's algorithm to account for speed, which was kind of needed because a lot of sites were getting quite slow, really. So I do think it's meant that in the methodology of building a site, you are thinking more about speed as part of your decision making than maybe a few years ago. I think a bit of the kind of panic has died off a little bit, but the problem's still there if you go and audit a lot of sites. And I think what happens for a lot of brands is there's always a bigger problem to fix. But throughout that whole time, you could have been getting a better conversion rate by having a faster store.
Yeah, it's a little surreptitious in that regard. Like it kind of sneaks up on some of these brands. Do you see that Deloitte Google report? Like, what is it? Milliseconds make millions?
No. What is it?
You should check it out. I'll send it. I'll send it to you after this. It's a pretty interesting read. But yeah, it's really exciting times, like seeing all this emergent technology come out to address these pain points. And I'll note that beyond moving, because I think that so much of some of the interest in progressive web application technology is oriented around speed. And yeah, back in 2018, Google changed, they introduced performance as part of the, what affects ranking. Something you said earlier was like, well, hey, we're doing the design and hey, we're going to use React. So it's like, we can just say yes to everything we want. That to me is an amazing thing, because I have absolutely as you, I'm sure, have sat down with brands who they sometimes, if they're talking to their, one in-house developer, or, they've talked to some other firm and it's been like, hey, no, in fact, the designer did this beautiful design for this site that you totally want. And now the developer is just like, nope, nope. Have to do this differently, have to do that differently. Nope. And it's to be able to say that, to be able to be like, well, hey, actually with React and with JavaScript, we can say yes. We can kind of have our cake and eat it too in that regard. I think that's pretty wild, pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely happening, and more we're able to move away from templating and boilerplates and so on, and just start from scratch each time. And it just means so much more flexibility, but without the disadvantage, a few years ago that you'd have an immense project cost because of the amount of development time. So yeah, things are definitely going in the right direction.
Yeah. I'd be curious to get your take, and this is, we're about to wrap up here. What do you think? And of course I'm biased and you probably, hey, we're all biased, right? But I'll ask the question anyways. How do you think, how do you consider low code or no code technology and its influence in this space? And do you see it kind of disrupting how brands and think about enabling their e-commerce teams and their marketing and merchandising teams?
First of all, I'm not worried about it as an agency director, because I think this trend has been happening more and more, where sites are easier to look after themselves, but the amount of work always remains because there's still an implementation required. And like I say, there's so many things that have made sites more complicated as they've got more importance, like accessibility and so on. So I think on the agency side, I think sometimes it can feel like, oh, low code means it's less fun for us or something along those lines. Whereas actually it means you can just spend your time better. And in fact, that's why we started using Shopify years ago in the first place, because we didn't want to be maintaining our own e-commerce checkout and so on. And it let us focus on what's important. So I think low code is just the continuation of that trend that as an agency, what do you focus on? And I think it's the same for a brand, that a brand shouldn't be worried about technology in that sort of way of, I mean, let's go back like 10, 15 years. You might have had someone in a brand that like was thinking about server configuration. And now that just seems bananas that anyone would need to know about that in a brand. And I think it's the same thing that's going on with some back-end development. And this is what's causing it, that most brands now don't need the amount of development resource or intense development resource that they might have done a few years ago. And that's because of tools like this, that it's so much easier now to build an amazing experience by being a non-developer. I don't want to say non-technical person, but like a non-developer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, at least from my impression, from the very first time that I heard about We Make Websites and saw the work that you were putting out, I was like, this is a phenomenal agency. And from what I've seen, the great agencies, their focus is rooted in creativity and strategy and industry expertise and technology expertise. And it's really that becoming that deeply trusted technical advisor and partner to the brand that's the focus of these phenomenal agencies. Because I mean, dude, there are a lot of folks who can code, right? I mean, look, how many people are in the Shopify experts, not the Shopify Plus partners, but the experts directory? It's got to be like 10,000, tens of thousands of developers, right? So offering the ability to do development, to literally writing code isn't a differentiated or unique thing in the slightest. And from at least in my experience being an agency owner, it's absolutely, it's not just at Glass and Marker, it wasn't just about making video. Anyone can make a video, there's the technology is available to anyone. It's but can you make something great? And that's something that's
and even if the technology was perfect, you still have to deal with people. And so like think about how many meetings on a normal project happen just to find out what we want to build in the first place. And that's before any code or even any design is done. So that will never go away. Like building good software will always be difficult, even with the best tools out there. And that's so anyone that's in product or design or whatever, or even I would extend it to copywriting and video production, whatever it is, it's always going to be in demand.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been great. To wrap up, this is a question that we like to ask for wrap up to all of our subject matter experts here. What are one is fine, or two things that you recommend to scaling brands to best be competitive in the market?
Okay, so scaling brands. So I think keeping their eye on analytics and using that to your advantage. So looking for pages with high exit rates, high bounce rates, low conversion rates, low speed is really key. And also internationally working out where your audience is. Most scaling brands want to go international at some point, which is what we do a lot of. And I think knowing early on like where that interest is and maybe doing some MVP sort of launches in those markets is a good place for a growing brand. So using analytics to their full power, and that's my main one. But I also think just talking to customers directly and getting that feedback can be hard to do or remember to do as you're scaling. But I think you can get invaluable feedback on the customer experience just by talking to a few customers. And I notice sometimes if we show our sites to people, like either the client or even just like friends and family, they'll point out, oh, this button's confusing or this thing's confusing that you've not been able to see despite working on it for weeks. And so I think getting that sort of feedback from other people from a different perspective helps you build better experiences.
Yeah, love that. Staying data driven, being ahead of the curve on performance and on international expansion. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. And
Pleasure.
to all the viewers who are watching this at home or wherever you may be. A ton of the e-commerce challenges we spoke about today happen to be what customers come to Shogun for all the time, particularly when it comes to creating exceptional experiences and exceeding creative limits. For more on how Shogun helps with richer front-end experiences, check out getshogun.com/frontend and tune in next time for another episode of Commerce Shift. Thanks, everyone.